Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hack UCF General Body Meeting on this Friday. I'm Michael Juici, the current president, and we'll be going through a panel today. So if you are a member and would like your attendance to be tracked for this meeting today, please visit the sign-in form as linked on screen here. This is so that we can make sure you are an active student member according to SGA and the Constitution. And by attending 50% of our meetings, you are allowed to then vote in elections. So where can you find us? We have a mailing list you can subscribe to that you get our newsletter and any other updates for events that we have going on. We also have our own shop now where you can buy some of our merchandise like masks, pins, hats, beanies, stuff like that. And our most popular is our Discord. That is where we post all of our links and events and things of that nature, and where all the club hangs out, and you're welcome to join and participate. It's even where we do some of our CTFs, and there is one happening this weekend. Little foreshadowing for that one. And of course, we have a Twitter. You can follow us on there. So let's go over today's topics. So today, we're going to go over the announcements for this week, and we will have a portion to explain the secretary nominations that will be happening today, and we'll go over that later. We're going over the tool time of subdomain enumeration with Peyton, and a Q&A panel will be the main talk about careers in cybersecurity, and that will be the remainder of our time, and then we will have closing. So if you are interested in helping run this club, please join us for our operations meetings every Monday at 7:30 p.m. You can find that link on the calendar, in Zoom, and in web courses. They are open to anyone who would like to volunteer or like to give a little bit more to the club than just attending the general body meetings. During this time, we plan things such as our Friday meetings and our weekend workshops. And of course, we would love to have you there. Something that happens today is the registration for DOE Cyberforce is closing. This is a blue team style competition where you defend systems, and I believe you have to prepare documentation for them for someone to then learn how to use these systems you've built. You can find out more information at the URL on screen. And normally it is restricted to one team per school of 6 people, but this year is going to be a little different. It is a solo competition. So you enroll yourself to compete, and it's just a team of 1. And you can compete to win a national recognized trophy if you do that. That closes today. So if you're interested in doing that, please look into that right after this meeting and get yourself registered. Upcoming is also the National Cyber League. That also closes today at just about midnight, just before then. Again, more information can be at that link. It's great for training, lots of resources, and it's great for beginners. It's $35 to enter. And if you're interested, we hope that you compete. They also have a schedule they can see on screen. And I believe they're going to be starting at November 6th is that start time for the team game. Individual as above. Right. So another thing happening this weekend is the Clemson CTF. It will be happening tomorrow on Saturday. It starts at noon. This is a big CTF that's put on by some of our friends over at Clemson. So we would love to see people participate in this. If you're interested in doing so, you can hop into the bot commands channel in our Discord and get the NightSec role. And the NightSec role in those NightSec categories is where all of the CTF stuff happens. We really encourage people to participate in this of all skill levels, and we hope to see you there tomorrow, this Saturday. Everyone is welcome, of course. You don't need any prerequisites or skill sets. We would love to see you just show up and have a good time. So this Sunday at noon, not Saturday, this Sunday, we will be hosting an OSINT workshop and CTF. So it's going to be a workshop led by, I believe, Daniel and Sarah on this Sunday at noon for an OSINT workshop, followed by a pseudo CTF style challenge, I believe. Workshop should be about an hour, and it's on Sunday because of the CTF that's happening this Saturday. We don't want to have any overlap there. So we hope you tune out then. And of course, as always, we have our virtual Cyberlab in our Discord. We cannot have the in-person Cyberlab. So if you like to hang out and socialize, we can, of course, hang out in that Discord. And I did forget to mention, apologies, the OSINT workshop. If you're not aware, the open source information intelligence, what does that mean? It's basically finding out information for, I suppose, individuals or certain things. It's honestly, I'm sorry, I can't. It is finding out information about something or someone to get more information. But of course, all that will be explained far better on Sunday. So, additionally, we also have a Minecraft server that was, I think, dropped this week in the Discord, if you were able to see that. We are going to be all remote, so we can't all be together in the same room, but hopefully we can be all together in the same Minecraft server. It's running 1.16.2, and you can visit that via minecraft.hackysf.org. And I believe some people are going to be hopping in there after the meeting. So yes, I believe it is Java. All right. So without further ado, let's move on to the nomination procedure for secretary. So this week, our secretary, Marissa, had placed in her resignation. We appreciate all the time you've put into this club and all the efforts you've given us, and we thank you for your service here. So without further delay, let's go over the requirements for this and what you can do to nominate someone or yourself. So all of this information, it's a big wall of text, but you can find the full document of where this was taken from at our Constitution. You can visit that at hackysf.org/constitution. Basically, what this means is to be an officer of any position, you must, at the time of your election and during your term, meet the minimum requirements such as enrollment hours, GPA, academic and disciplinary standing, financial, all that stuff. Basically means you must be an enrolled student at UCF. I believe it can be either part-time or full-time. That doesn't matter. You must not be on academic probation and stuff like that, not even holds in your account. And there's a membership requirement for student meetings. So you must attend 75% of officer meetings and membership meetings and all events, of course, unless you have an excused absence or be expunged by a 2/3 affirmative vote of officers. So that's kind of the general requirements. You can read the whole thing in verbatim, in context, at our Constitution, as above. So now on to the specific position of secretary. These are just the duties outlined in the Constitution. Again, we encourage you, if you're interested, to please read this at the Constitution from directly the source in context of the entire document. So some things to note are just emailing people of the meetings that we have at least 48 hours in advance. That's done via our newsletter. Accurate minutes, that's just kind of taking notes of during the operations meetings. Accurate list of members, and all the stuff you're welcome to read at your own leisure. But yeah, this position is going to be open for nomination. So how do you do that? You are able to nominate yourself for the position, and you are able to nominate someone else for the position if you think they'd be a good fit for this. If you nominate someone else, though, we will have to contact them and make sure that they accept their nomination. We cannot have someone run for the position if they don't want it, of course. Nominations are open from right now until Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is when our operations meeting for that week concludes, and that is when the deadline for nominations will be closed. So if you're interested in nominating, you can do that now and state that in chat, and we can write that down and get that done, or you can nominate someone else. If after this meeting you would like to have someone nominate or nominate yourself, you may email the email on screen, execs@hackysf.org, and you must give us your name, your SID, and your NIGHTS email. That's so that we're all aware of who are nominating, and we can provide that list to our advisor who can validate things such as enrollment status and GPA requirements. So once again, that's open until Monday at 8:30. You're welcome to do that now or over the weekend. So you have time to think about this. And once again, you can visit the Constitution in its entirety at hackysf.org/constitution. So without further ado, I will now pass it off to Peyton for tool time.
Okay, let's get this turned on here. Okay. Webcam cover's on. There we go. So this week I'm going to be talking about subdomain enumeration. This is something that I was going to do a shorter tool time on DNS dumpster and all that. But since we don't have current events, I can just do subdomain enumeration as a whole and put in like 2 or 3 tools. If you want to ask any questions about the tool time, I recommend DMing me with that name, and people can put that in other places, but just DM me. So starting off, like, what is a domain? Domains originated with ARPANET, so you would write down a... I just realized we're looking at Tracy's screen. I need to share mine. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Because I need to share my terminal here in a second. Share. Okay, there we go. Domains started off with ARPANET. Essentially, their goal was to turn an IP address into words. So instead of having to remember like google.com or ucf.edu, well, instead of having to remember their IP addresses, you remember just google.com or ucf.edu. So like Google, if I use like dig or DNS lookup tool, will give me 172.217.2.142. But nobody's remembering that. That's really long and annoying and a bunch of numbers. Like nobody wants to remember that. So with RFC 82 and 83 linked below, RFCs, if you haven't seen them, are just like document. They're like man pages essentially. They describe a specification for how something is occurring. And if you look at those, they explain like what is a domain and all that technically. I'm not going to go over that. TLDR, you link a name to a number. You can also link other things into there like A, AAA, CNAME, MX, like all these weird records. These are just different types, but all they do is they link a name to a value, whether that be an IP address is a number, quadruple A, which is IPv6 addresses, CNAME is just like linking it to another domain, MX is used for email, etc. So what makes a domain? You have top levels, you have com, org, net, gov, etc. When you go to Namecheap, you're buying like, hackucf.org that was bought through Namecheap. Namecheap went up to .org. It's like, hey, I want to buy hackucf.org. They buy it. You're able to change the records on it. Buying a TLD is really, really hard. You don't want to do that. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, and legal fees and all that nonsense. So what people do is they buy a subdomain off of that. So google.com, they didn't just buy like the TLD of Google. Amazon bought the AWS TLD, but that's weird. UCF just buys, or they are, I wonder if they actually bought the UCF.edu or if they're just like registered it. Yeah, Google did buy the .google TLD, but like google.com is the one that they actually use. So, yeah, com.google. So what's a subdomain? Well, if we bought like hackucf.org, then we also control anything prior to that. So like www.hackucf.org or shop.hackucf.org or ctf.hackucf or whatever I want.hackucf.org. You can put whatever the heck you want before that. There's kind of a little bit of a weird security thing there in that it links things to your organization. So for example, like maybe we have like an admin.example.com or like a vmware.example.com or HR or mail or like, NVIDIA's actually secret website where they actually have RTX 3080s. Like you can buy, you don't have to buy them. If you own hackucf.org, you can put whatever the frick you want before that. There's like length restrictions, but you can put whatever you want. You can also do multiple dots. So if I want like, ctf.site.hackucf.org, you do that for free. You could just register it. Quick note on subdomain takeover. So you remember how I said like you can buy like example admin.example.com. There's a really weird subcase in which certain companies will like allow you to redirect a subdomain to them. So the really common case here is hackucf, like www.hackucf.org could point to www.hackucf.org.s3.amazonaws.com. So we can actually tell AWS, like, here's all the parts to our site, you guys host it, and then when people come to www.hackucf.org, we'll send them to you. And so we will put in the CNAME, and the CNAME says, if anybody tries to ask for www.hackucf.org, send them to www.hackucf.org.s3.amazonaws.com. The asterisk there is, say, like, after a few years, HackUCF no longer wants that website. So they delete all the stuff in the S3 bucket, they get rid of the S3 bucket, no longer exists, but the CNAME may still exist. There could be like hundreds of thousands of these at companies, and like you would never know. Well, you could know, but like they forget to change the CNAME. So www.hackqcf.org still points to that S3 link, but there's nothing there. The bucket no longer exists. So what an attacker can do is that they can just like, spin up a bucket called www.hackqcf.org, and now the actual www.hackqcf.org points to their bucket. So like a really good example of this is, imagine if like we had hackqcf.discord.gg, and hackqcf changes over to Matrix or whatever and gets rid of the Discord. Then another group could come along and just make their own Discord, and then boom, if somebody tries to go to discord or hackqcf.discord.gg, they actually go to the other person's Discord instead of ours. This is kind of common, and I just wanted to talk about it. Not incredibly important for this, but like a good thing to know. It's also really complex and took me like a while to wrap my head around, but if you Google it and you look at this article that I linked at the top, it's a pretty good example of like what could happen there. And he lists off, he lists off a bunch of websites that are vulnerable to this sort of thing, like AWS S3 vulnerable. Good examples. So why is all this important? So if you are on the blue team, you want to know all of your external DNS records. Yeah, as Bobby says, like this is like the very base level. Like I'm trying to go base level on this. So you can go much more difficult. Much more difficult. But why is this all important? If I'm a blue teamer, I want to know my external threat landscape, or I want to know like where can people attack me. So if I'm a blogger, I might just have like Payton.blog or whatever. And that's like all the DNS names I might have. But if I'm a company, like say I'm UCF, like I don't want people knowing that maybe there's like, backups-myucf.ucf.edu or whatever. And like, that's not good. So you may want to be aware of that record still exists so that you can then, delete the record or like see what's actually there to make sure that it's not vulnerable. If you are assessing a company or you're like red teaming or any of that, then you want to use this in order to try and figure out what all is there, of course. So you can gather information on services, discover things that you may not have already known. So for example, a really good example of that is if I attack, a watch company and their domain is watches.com or whatever, and I figure out that they have slack.watches.com, they probably use Slack. Or if they have, Drupal.watches.com, then they use Drupal probably. So you can use that in order to try and figure things out. You can also figure out like, what IP are they using? You can figure out if like they own IP space technically around that. It's easier in other ways. You can figure out other like information there. The other thing is that web servers sometimes will act differently if you access them via IP or via different subdomains. So you can figure that out and then like figure out different websites that may be hosted somewhere. So this is where I go into demos. I'm going to show off a few things in not that order because I'm going to actually do them in slightly different order. And we're going to go look at, since nothing I'm doing today is like really offensive, like nothing is going to touch these companies, I'm just looking things up. We're going to use hackqcf.org. Also, this DNS dumpster. DNS dumpster, I give it a domain and it shows me records that it thinks exist. So like feedback.hackqcf.org or bridge.hackqcf.org, or there used to be a Nextcloud thing.
Are you able to zoom in a bit?
Yeah, let me. There we go. You can see our MX records, you can see all that. So this lets you like very easily tell like what subdomains exist somewhere. This is really handy when you first look at somewhere and you're like, oh, I wonder what's there. DNS dumpster and just plop the domain in and you get a decent amount. Let's also do like, I don't know, let's do Amazon.com. And Amazon's gonna have a lot of records because they do this whole thing where they do DNS records that the beginning of it is the IP address with dashes, which leads to this nonsense. Also their Facebook verification, public key and all that. which is fun. Okay, doke. The next tool on the list is Passive Total. Passive Total is a research firm. Technically, it's Risk IQ. This is very, very, very common in a lot of companies. It's also expensive, but you know, the community version's free. I've used this now at 2 or 3 companies. So let's do the domain hackucf.org again. I'm gonna click the link. This is all the information it's able to get us on the free community edition. The big thing Passive Total gets you that's a little bit different is it gets you the IP history. So Passive Total does checks every once in a while, and it can tell you if the IP changes. Since ours points to a Cloudflare instance, or since it points to Cloudflare, it can have different IPs, and you can also see like all the different places it's been in the past. It'll also show you like the whois records and if those have changed, and like what certificates have been cut for this. So like, you know, the actual TLS certificate, you can get information about that, and any past ones and when they expire, and if there are any other ones that are subdomains of this. Also subdomains, they just straight out list off a bunch. Next is Aquaten, or let's skip to crt.sh. crt.sh. This is one that if any people were here for last spring when Ian came and he was talking about OSINT, we can, yeah, Bobby, your NS is still there and it's still vegan. So the crt.sh, we can go ahead and put in other domains and misspell them. hackecf.org. And then we can see a list of certificates that have been registered to that domain. You can do that with any domain, and this is entirely passive. Like everything I've done so far is literally just the equivalent of like Google searching. What's another good domain to use? Let's do netflix.com, why not? Sometimes it's a bit of fun to just go around and like see what's there. Trust you on Wells Fargo. Just wellsfargo.com. wellsfargo.com. nccp-ironman.netflix.com. Okay, so Wells Fargo, we see like eDisclose, we see LRW, we see some telnet thing, password.wellsfargo.com, that sounds like fun. Online decision tool, whatever the frick that is, there's a lab. Wholesale retirement, password, a bunch of labs. Like as you can see, like there's a lot of information just from them registering certificates. This is also really useful for being able to enumerate, like, you know, because the big question we're asking here is like what subdomains exist for that domain. So this is a really good way of doing that. The next 2 that we're going to use are kind of a bunch of the tools glued together. I'm going to get the Zoom thing out of the way here. So as my computer lags to no end, I have no idea why my terminal is being so slow. So I have Sublister. Sublister literally glues a bunch of these, Sublister literally just glues a bunch of these programs together. So we're going to give it the domain, Python 3, Sublister, TechD. Let's do, I don't know, let's do Wells, well, let's do League of Legends.com. Oh, I have to source, then activate because I did this earlier, and then we run it again. So now it's going to search Baidu, it's going to search Google, it's going to search Yahoo, it's going to search Bing, Ask, Netcraft, I don't know what Netcraft is, DNS Dumpster, we saw that earlier, Virus Total, so like if anything saw calling back to it, ThreatCrowd, can't remember what ThreatCrowd is, I think I may have seen it before, SSL certificates, CRT.sh, and that sort of thing, and passive DNS, which is Passive Total, if I'm right. This is going to run for a minute. Yeah, source code activate thing, I just built it. So what you do is pip3 install that guy. The instructions for that are down here in the instructions, recommended versions, dependencies, etc. So all the instructions are down here. I didn't want to waste everybody's time in trying to download stuff. Oh, look at that. There's a bunch of legal engines domains. So like, as you can see, like just from running run command, yeah, virtual environment, just from like one command, I can go ahead and see a bunch of these domains for League of Legends. As you can see, there is a lot of information here just from like doing essentially automated searches. This is really fun to do against any domain, like, and it doesn't actually, like, as I said, this is all passive. We are yet to do anything that is in any way like even touching the company. This is just literally a bot that Googles things. So we're just going to do hackUCF.org, because the next thing that we're going to do is semi-active. I'm going to copy all these names. I'm going to put them into a thing called target. I looked at UCF.edu. It literally just searched for that one page and returned a screenshot of the home page. And we're going to use Aquatone. Aquatone, literally all it does is it opens up Chromium and takes a screenshot. That's it. So what you do is you go get all the subdomains, and then you go to Aquatone, and you're like, hey, Aquatone, go to all of them. That's all you're doing. So I cat targets into Aquatone. Build instructions, of course, are on their thing. Yep, so I gave it the whole list of subdomains. It's checking them out in a bunch of different ports. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but my network connection. Oh, you see just fine, okay. I wasn't sure if my network connection was dying because of that. Sometime, like I'm looking at my video thing and it's like lagging out a little bit. So now we see we have an HTML report in aquatone.report. What did Aquatone find? It found Google sign-ins. It found, hey, look at that, there's OpenStack. Hey, look at that, there's an error for workshops.hackucf.org, or like feedback surveys, or Ceph, or like Matrix. Look at that, there's all this stuff. Look at that, ccf.hackucf.org returned a screenshot. And we can see like all the different subdomains that like came back for this guy. So we can see all the different responses. So yeah, this is really fun. You can actually like see what all's here, and you can see whatever this graph gives us. I'm guessing this is just connecting different services with different libraries and stuff. You can move things around. Oh, you can. Pages, and then you do like by similarity or single pages. And like this is very similar to what you would see out of something like if I went to what's it called? Oh, I'm blanking on the name. What's the thing I'm thinking about where you were able to view IP addresses on other ports? Shodan. I don't know why I forgot Shodan. Hackucf.org. Oh, it's not going to pop up. RIP. Because Shodan takes IPs. One second, let's do a. It's not going to work. Because that's going to return us a Cloudflare IP, but it's going to at least have something on it. But you can see like where this is giving me the HTTP response. Aquatone is giving me the HTTP response and all the server information and all that. And so we can see like servers, Nginx and all that. And you could see like, you know, what cookies are there. So like this is a really good way to enumerate whole companies, like really quick, or whole networks or whole domains. You can see everything that exists like very easily. And a lot of this is not that easy to detect. Nobody really detects it unless you're good. It's hard to detect. Security trails, I haven't heard of that one. Let's see. Security trails is, yeah, similar thing. So you can go ahead and see like different subdomains and stuff off of there. I've also seen other ones with like digital shadows and stuff, does like intelligence stuff, and they'll find subdomains. But these are all really fun tools for figuring out like your like what exists, what information's out there. And then when you go to assess a company, you could say, oh, well, what all exists like for this company domain? Like, can I get screenshots of it? I want to see what this is really quickly and be able to triage those types of events. Links are all in these slides. And as I said, like if you need to reach out to me, DM me that number. I'll post in the chat. And that's all from me. So handing it back off here.
All right. Thank you, Peyton. Let me pull up the main talk. Just a moment. Great. Hold on, let me get the logos open. Okay, so thank you, Peyton, for the tool time on the all that subdomain cool stuff. So let's go ahead and get started with the panel. Our panelists today are these 6 friendly folks. Let's go ahead and get started by having them introduce themselves real quick from the list you see on screen, just listed in alphabetical order by first name. So let's go ahead and get started with Austin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cool. I'm Austin. I graduated, I think, in 2015. I was part of like the first team that we sent to like do CCDC stuff and some of the first like Hack UCF meetings. I was there from the start. So from there, I went on to go do like software development at Amazon, and now I'm at Snap doing security engineering on a detection and response team.
Right. Let's have Bobby.
Yep. Yeah. So my name is Bobby Tonic. I am technically pseudo alumni because I'm still doing student stuff. But I basically do a bunch of software engineering stuff, mostly cloud and distributed systems. I used to work at TrailBits, but I'm currently working over at Square doing detection and response.
Sure. I think David is actually on a work call at this time that happened to overlap. So he's not here with us right now. Hopefully he'll be in hopefully a few minutes late, but that's okay. So let's go over to Heather.
Let's see, I started at UCF in 2013 and finished a bachelor's and master's of computer engineering, was a secretary and president at Hack UCF. Now I'm working at NARI and working on my PhD at UCCS.
Jacob?
Let me just put my camera on. There we go. All right. I'm Jacob, and alias SolarBenite and lists of arrays on other platforms. But I work in secure software development, primarily with kind of like pseudo-embedded lockdown Linux systems. And I started in the club in 2013, graduated in 2017, and I'm still in the area and still like helping out when I can.
Hi, Willa Riggins. I went to UCF a very long time ago. I kind of had a bunch of different roles in my career. So I've been everywhere from Lockheed to Veracode, now at GuidePoint Security, leading their AppSec team. So, happy to be here.
Right. Thank you for that. We will also be accepting questions live during this panel. You can submit your questions via Slido. That is a domain. .do is the top level domain. And it will ask you when you go there to a meeting code. It's 88913. As they come in, we will moderate them and make sure they are on topic and, of course, appropriate to be asked. So while those come in, we also have some questions prepared while we wait for people to ask them. So let's see. So one of the first questions we had come in was actually for Jacob. And the question is, what knowledge did you have prior to starting your internship, and did it help?
So I started off in the club, and most of my knowledge actually came from participating in Hack UCF and eventually going to workshops and reading stuff online. The internship introduced me to what it was like in software development, and then it just so happened that there was another team in the same division unit that decided that was working on like secure software, and they were like, "Oh, we have this other team. Would you like to be hired on to do this secure software work?" And I was like, "Yeah." So my internship actually had very little to do with what I currently do, but it was the stepping stone that got me in my current position.
Okay. Thank you for that. This question kind of goes to all of you. You can, I suppose, answer them in the same order or pass. It doesn't really matter to me. Why did you get into the security field? So if you want to start with Austin and then work your way down alphabetically.
I don't know, just kind of seemed somewhat interesting. I think I was a little bit influenced by my brother I have a brother who's like 3 years older than me, and he was already doing similar stuff at Boston University with their like builds club there. So then when John and like other people started to like found HackUCF and sent like the interest email, it just seemed interesting to me. So that's kind of HackUCF really started to like dive into it, right?
Yeah, I think for me, it was more a natural progression. I started out doing QA, and then I went into software engineering and was more of like a hands-on developer. And then as I had like started moving up in software engineering, I realized that like I was doing very similar things, just different focus, right? So like instead of looking for like weird code smells just on the like maintainability side, it's like software security reviews. It's like looking for code smells just for exploitable bugs. And then that kind of just cascaded from there and is really what kind of set up the rest of the progression. I've done a bunch of stuff throughout security that is entirely unrelated to that. I think it's really just kind of a mindset that you tend to enjoy looking for certain types of problems, and security is just one of those types of problem sets.
I would have to say that I am an untraditional student. I left high school and went into the military for 6 years, and then I came back during the first financial crisis, and they were like, "Hey, we don't have a job for you." And so I went back to school, and I kind of wandered around for 2 years in engineering, and then went to UCF from Valencia, and I actually tried to rush a sorority, which obviously didn't work out very well. That's okay. Because then I walked into a HackUCF meeting because one of my friends thought it was cool and didn't want to go alone. And then suddenly I'm in security.
All right, I go next, I guess. Yeah, it's sort of similar to me. I heard about the club, I think it was on the news in 2013, that there was this club at UCF that was into hacking. And I thought, well, I really don't know much about security. So I thought, I'm going to come to these meetings and find out. The first club meeting was a talk by Dittmar, if I'm not mistaken. And he went like in depth into binary reverse engineering. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. And then, but I came back, I kept going, and then continued on in secure software development.
He's such a good presenter too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my security story is weird. Like, I liked this stuff when I was little, and then I got into software dev and thought that was it. And then I'm sitting at Lockheed, and it's like my first day writing Cold Fusion for this app, and I just started, and I'm asking the guy, like, what's the biggest thing that, I need to know? And he's like, well, every time you touch a file, look for the SQL injection vulnerabilities. And I was like, wait, what? Apparently, on this particular project, you could only fix something if you were paid to work on that file. So we had to fix all the SQLi on that file every single time we were in there because, it was an issue, but no one was paying us to fix it. So that's kind of how I got my start into weird security stuff, and eventually got picked up by a secure software engineering program inside of Lockheed. and I worked my way around and finally got to hack things for a living. But yeah, it's super weird. I wish I could say it's the loft crack disk that my dad put on top of the computer. No, it's bad code.
Okay. I'd also like to adjust the question on the how they got started in the security field. Otherwise, we can move on to the ones. Right. I want to see if actually David popped in for this next question, and he did not yet. It is about kind of like how the club took you to where you are, and I would like to get his opinion on that, but hopefully he'll pop in later. I suppose we'll address the last question of the predefined ones, then we'll move on to the ones that have been building up in live. What is something, this goes to everyone, of course, what is something you wish someone would have told you before you first started your internship or project? And I suppose we'd extend that to your career. Start with Austin.
I don't know, it's kind of a hard one, but I guess it's just like, don't be afraid to like admit what you don't know and ask others for help, because more senior people are almost always willing to help you and like make you like have you learn those things and grow you in your career. But if you just sit there silent and like, it's obviously good to go research things yourself, go try to like find the answers, but when you've exhausted those options, it's like, don't fake like you know what you're doing. It's like, it's okay to not, because nobody's an expert at everything.
From
I
Bobby?
think I would probably complement that with remember the fact that you matter. Like, you are not the product of your work. Like, it's really easy to feel like what you're doing is insignificant compared to potentially your peers, or just the overall problem set. And your contributions do matter. And especially in an internship, you're given 3 months to attempt to complete a problem, theoretically, or to contribute to a larger system. And I think that there is a huge misconception between the interns and the people who are managing the interns as to what the managers expect of the interns. It's okay to fail. It's okay to admit failure. Just do it with grace and ahead of time. I think that's probably one of the biggest recommendations I could make. Like, don't be afraid to fail, but also make sure that you are honest with you and your peers. So.
Oh man. All right. Well, if somebody in here is kind of a glutton for punishment and decides to go the academic route, I would say make sure that it's beneficial to stay at the same university. There are different conflicting graduation requirements that your undergrad may or may not have prepared you for if you decide to go for a graduate degree at a different program. And your advisor will make and break you. I've gone through 4 of them, can confirm. Let's see, if it's more on the professional side, I would say startups are high-risk endeavors. Usually nobody knows what's going on, and you have the opportunity to learn a lot, or you have the opportunity to get screwed a lot. And you need to be aware of that going from university into the professional world, that not everybody's out there that has, your best intentions in mind.
That was really good. And I guess what I've learned is that this industry is very large. Like when during one of the first meetings, actually, Gaben pointed out like the security is a mile wide and an inch deep, and I didn't really believe it at the time. So for one thing, I originally went into the industry expecting to just be doing software development, and I thought, I'm going to learn one language, learn it well, and yeah, I see your face out there. Yeah, but yeah, I thought I'm going to learn C++.
One language, huh?
Yeah, one language.
How's that going
Good job.
for you?
Amazing. I think I'm up to like 5 languages now, and I originally thought I was going to be doing Windows, and I'm doing Linux, like really in depth with Linux. And shell scripting and all that stuff, and building custom distros of, well, not custom distros, but custom packaged Linux, basically. It's like totally not what I was expecting. So I think when you're in college, just try to focus on being general. So just learn things like shell scripting. Try to learn at least one programming language, because when you get out, you may end up dealing with legacy code or like some new JavaScript framework that just came out yesterday. So you really never know. So just try to be general when you're in college and pick up even useless stuff at the time, because it'll later become useful.
I would expand slightly, and I will actually guarantee you that you will absolutely positively see legacy systems for the rest of your career.
They might even tell you they're shut down, and they're not.
Like, they don't actually know that they're on their network.
Yeah.
And code you write today is legacy tomorrow.
That's
Yeah.
if you get lucky and they have an asset list to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
What is this asset list of which you speak?
So, I mean, since I always go last, I'm the old, I think. I don't know if I'm the oldest on the panel or not, but I feel old, so I'm going to say it. Your career is yours, and no one's going to make it for you. All the big jumps I've ever made is because I went out, talked to somebody, or, made friends, networked, whatever you want to call it. Like, how I got into security was I got a rotational program, and I basically visited every manager in information security at Lockheed's CIS and said, "Hey, do you have any money? And do you want someone who you don't have to pay for their vacation? You should just pay me to do the work." That was how I got into security. I had to go and basically ask people to hire me, sort of. But it's about, you're the driver there. No one's going to do that for you. I've had managers who are great at helping me, but at the end of the day, like, you have to take that initiative to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to get there. And sometimes that means work in security awareness for a year, so you can get on a specific budget and get a clearance. Sometimes that means, jumping ship from an awesome company that you love, and going to join some friends at a new company, which is what I just did. It's do what you think is right for you, and accept nothing less, because you are the last line of that. Like, whether it's a moral decision or a comfort decision, or, hey, this sucks, I want to do something else decision. But I guess the other thing I'll say is, in some ways, like Jacob said, it's a large industry, but in others, it's super tiny. A lot of the people you see in the room, or not room, but on the Zoom call with you, you're going to see again. They're going to be at companies you want to be at, or you're going to be at a company they want to be at, or you're going to have a problem that they have. So definitely make more friends if you can, because you never know when that's going to come in handy, or, whatever. Oh, and the last thing is, don't drink 5-hour energy before a call with a VP, especially when you're new. Don't ask me why I know that.
All right. I also think David was able to hop on just now. Are you able to be with us, David?
Oh, I can unmute myself. Yes, I am with you guys. Hello.
Can you give us just a quick introduction of yourself for those that don't know you?
All right. I'm David Maria. I was the president, I think, 2 years ago. I've interned at Uber, Facebook, and Cisco, and then I ended up taking the job with Cisco. So right now I'm working as an incident response consultant at Cisco Talos Incident Response. and I was a computer engineer when I was here, and it was part of like CCDC and CPTC teams and CTF and stuff. I think that should cover.
All right, cool. Glad that you finally were able to make it with us today.
Yes. Number one rule of consulting, I guess, don't expect normal business hours. So.
Right. All right. I will do my best to sort of combine two questions because they're very similar in nature. Initially addressed to, I suppose, Heather and David, but it can go to other members in the club as well. And basically, with your time spent with Hack UCF, either as a former officer or even as a member for that regard, what was the greatest thing you got out of the club, or greatest tool, or people, or essentially, how has this club helped you, or what have you gotten out of it? Or if even if there is like something that was a waste of your time with the club, was even in there. So, kind of what did you get out of this, being either officer or member? And that'll go to all of you, of course.
Yep. I'll let Heather take this one first, and I'll go ahead and grab it second.
Oh man, no pressure. All right, so what did I get out of this club? When I first got into the club, I only really had engineering background. Like I came from working on as a technician on a nuclear reactor, right? That's kind of where I came from. That doesn't really know anything about computers. The most that I had really known was that we had something called an auto titrator, which is like this machine that's like this big, and you'd put like little cups of chemicals into it, and it like auto synthesizes all of the chemicals for you and tells you about chemistry. And it never took Windows updates or drivers at all, and so you'd have to like reinstall the whole thing. So what did I get from the club? So we just had tool time, right? During tool time, Peyton, thank you, went through and discussed a whole bunch of open source intelligence techniques that I just went through an assessment with a bunch of security engineers, and they didn't know any of those OSINT techniques at all. So you're getting access, what I mean by this story, right? What you're getting is access to technical security tools that you will use, and having knowledge of how these things interact with each other, or how to conduct assessments or security gaps, just things that you come into a meeting and like sit down and people just tell you things. Like that's money out in the real world, but at Hack UCF you get it for free. You get to a community that people just want to sit around and talk about security and the crazy things that are happening out in the world. Like you don't really get that anywhere else. And then as obviously from a professional standpoint, it helps to have Hack UCF on your resume. It shows that I was dedicated, that I was in tune to what I was doing, that I was a hard worker, and everything else that's resume fluff, right? And if you want to ask, like, as president, did people come to me later and like, hey, I just got this resume from student so-and-so at UCF. They said they went to Hack UCF meetings. Have you ever heard of them? I've done lookups for that. I've like, student so-and-so said they were at ops meetings. I've never even seen their face. I have no idea what this name is. So like having that network, and like, remember, Willa said that this network is small. You will all get questions, like if you decide to an employer, like, hey, I go to Hack UCF meetings. They're going to go to Hack UCF people and be like, do you know this person? But, as that's like a double-edged sword, that's also a benefit. If you can say, if like other people can speak for you, like, yeah, I go to meetings, I do CTFs, I've done workshops, I participate, I blah, 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 blah. It helps bolster your resume for local people in town who know who Hack UCF is.
Yep, for sure. And not just local too, I mean, all around the country. We've got lots of Hack UCF alum everywhere. We've kind of taken over, but I think I'll go ahead and follow up on that one. I think kind of Heather covered it pretty well, but just won't take too much time. Like the short answer is like everything really. I mean, kind of owe most of like my career and my college experience to Hack UCF. Really, I think technically the tool time, just like getting exposed to tools, getting exposed to people where you can talk about security, is like priceless. You get the networking, the resume fluff, which is awesome. I mean, I got my first internship from Hack UCF, and that kind of snowballed to all my other internships and my full-time job. So I think, and a big part of it is that human interaction aspect, right? Like being able to interact with people professionally. You kind of learn that through the club and through leadership roles, and also through competitions. That's something that people look for in interviews, because anyone can go online and study, you know, for months at a time and try to kind of grasp some of the technical concepts. But if you haven't actually worked on a team with some of these technical concepts and understood kind of the nuances around working in cybersecurity and, you know, how businesses run, which you can get from talking to people in industry here, and also some of the competitions that try to simulate that, I think that makes the club really valuable. And just one specific thing, I guess the most valuable tool I got from the club was a CyberChef. That's a tool I still use in my everyday job. So that's something I saw at a tool time and I still use all the time. Yep. Anybody else want to take it?
Yeah. I think I'll kind of compound this with kind of two things. So first of all, the recognition part as being a member of Hack UCF is really important. Like, it goes beyond just the US actually. And I think David was there for this, but when we were traveling overseas for one of the competitions, we were in like Madrid, I think, and we were walking through the airport and someone was like, "Oh, that's Hack UCF," and started giggling. And it threw us for a trip, because we don't know if this was one of the other teams that was also traveling for it, or whether or not it was just some like random thing. But like, nonetheless, it's still Cascades. Like when we got there, I think I think it was Cisco Talos was there as well. But like they knew us too. Like CCDC carries a lot of weight. There's several other CTFs that carry a lot of weight. And like they notice names. So when you say that you're a member of them, it will trigger certain responses. With this in mind though, I think, you know, much the opposite of like, what are things that like you actually didn't do, like when you were at Hack UCF? I think one of the things that was important that I didn't realize until it was slightly too late was there is a healthy level of involvement. And that is like, you don't have to do every CTF. You don't have to do every single event just to pad out your resume. Ditmar, no, you absolutely do not. You just have to choose the right ones,
Ditmar.
honestly. Like, you know, you wouldn't necessarily go and do CCDC if you wanted to go and do reverse engineering, right? You need to choose the correct events for what you want to line yourself up for. And because there's a lot of stuff that you can do in security, and not all of it is relevant. And with that in mind, there are tangential organizations and endeavors and studies that you can do to set yourself up well in parallel with Hack UCF. So like, if you want to go and do like secure code review stuff, you might want to get comfortable with software development. You absolutely want to get comfortable with software development. And that might not necessarily overlap with a lot of the content that you'll see at Hack UCF, because some of it might be network focused, some of it might be forensics focused, so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. Like, don't over involve yourself, and make sure that you know where you want to go roughly.
I have to agree with Bobby. Knowing where you want to go is probably the most important thing, and doing the competitions that are relevant to you and to where you want to go is super important. I had a really awesome interview with a Fortune 500 company, and I didn't say it in my bio, but I tend to blend machine learning and cybersecurity. And so this interview is for a data scientist who asked me what competitions I did. And they weren't talking about CTF competitions. They were talking about data science Kaggle competitions. So make sure you're paying attention to which ones you actually need. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I will say it's also fine to like not know what you want to do. Like, you guys kind of made a big thing about knowing your like path, and it's like, it's perfectly fine to be like, I like security stuff. Like, I don't know what I want to do in there, and then just go try a bunch of things, and ultimately like land on what you enjoy doing. And
Yeah, like
For sure.
in the process of doing CTFs, I learned that reverse engineering is fun, but I definitely don't want to do it for work. Like, there are certain things that you will find you like and you don't like, and that is a perfect example of
And
like
it's okay
go and
if
learn
that
what you want to do.
changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
some people will hate pen testing after they do it for a few years. And I promise you,
All that report writing, man. Nobody ever
Yeah.
tells you about that report writing.
That is the sneaky, unsexy aspect of the entire thing. It doesn't matter the specific focus. You could do like software development. You could do all the other things, documentation and writing and all of these things. Other than maybe write-ups, it's not really enforced at like the collegiate level. But the moment you enter industry and you go, I found this cool bug, and they're like, cool. Now steps for remediation, description, scenario, repro. Like, and you're sitting there and you're like, but I have the script, and they're like, yeah, but nobody cares. Like, oh,
Yeah, I think one big thing I do want to mention is like all the talk of competitions. Don't feel like if you can't get to some of the competition, especially like this year, a lot of them aren't even running or running at the same level. I mean, like you can do a lot of this stuff at home. Like you can find write-ups of people that have done some of the competitions that are in person only, or there are tons that are online only. And the reporting side, just because there's no competition that's forcing you to do the reporting doesn't mean you can't write a write-up of how you solved the challenge or how you went about participating in competition and posting it to GitHub or your own personal blog. So I think you don't have to participate in some of the big name competitions to get the same experience. And the important thing really isn't having that competition name on your resume. It's when they ask you in an interview, like, what experience do you have working on a team, or what experience do you have solving problems or writing reports? You can point to your GitHub and say like, oh, I've done these competitions on my free time, just kind of like I've gone out and searched for these challenges and I've solved them. I've written the write-ups, I worked in a group to solve them, stuff like that.
and I'll tell you from the hiring manager side, because I'm old, you put that stuff on your resume, and I'm going to read your resume.
Right.
I get a ton of resumes from folks who have this certification, that certification, but they don't do anything fun. And I'll tell you, most of the people who do CTFs, the ones that write the write-ups, the ones that enjoy this stuff and, put in the work and put it on their resume, those are the people that are fun to talk to. And I can talk to them about their job and they understand it and they get it. So not to say you have to write that stuff to get in, but it sure helps on a resume.
yeah. And I would also complement that potentially with like, pay attention to English 1101 and 1102. It's unsolicited advice, but it will pay off tenfold when you understand tenses and proper conjugation.
I spent like 2 hours reviewing the grammar in a report today. That's my life. So yes, please.
Oh, so many people or engineers have problems with passive and active voice. It's just like a thing.
I'm trying to think of a joke where I would say that in passive voice, but I can't. Yeah, sometimes it's helpful to have the screen reader read a report to you because it won't like insert the words that you were thinking. But in regards to the question, the tool that I use, I learned from MacUCF is Wireshark. Wireshark will save your butt someday. You'll be looking at packets and it'll be, well, for software development anyways, you'll be looking at packets and it'll be like, that byte looks wrong, and it is.
I think I'm too old for the actual original question. I was at UCF before Hack UCF was a thing. So thank you for existing.
Glad to be around. All right, let's go ahead and I'll mark that as submitted and move on to another question that someone submitted. So one of the questions is, how do you deal with coworkers that treat you differently due to your gender?
Ooh. So I work, I've worked consulting for the last few years. And I guess the last 2 or 3 years I've been either principal or lead. So I do a lot of pre-sales. So I sit on the phone and I talk to customers and find out what they want. And sometimes they don't listen to me. And that is what it is. If they don't want to listen to me, I can't make them listen to me. I've had to sometimes, get my peer and tell him, hey, this customer won't listen. Can you say what I said in your man voice? And they're like, yeah, I'll go do that. And he hops on and does it and doesn't know why, but like it gets done. And it sucks and I hate it, but like that's the way things are. And being a manager, sometimes people don't take the feedback I give seriously. And that leads to really tough conversations, and sometimes people lose their jobs. It sucks, but that's the way things are. Being treated differently is going to happen, but how you respond to it is kind of your thing. Again, I happen to be in a leadership position where I can do that, and where I have to put up with that. Not everyone is in that spot, but I would say to, find good managers who will stand up for you and listen to you. That's harder than it sounds, but it helps a lot.
I would say being treated differently in security is obviously associated more with just your gender, right? It could be like you are the other, you're too brown, you're from another country, you don't speak English as first language. There's like a whole bunch of reasons why you could be labeled as the other in a workplace. From experience, I would say before you even apply to the job and you read the job description, eventually you get to a position where you've read enough of them, where you can kind of tell about the company and the atmosphere that's around it, what kind of words that they use. Right, we just talked about OSINT. If you're going for an employer, you should be conducting OSINT on that employer. Try to head it off at the pass before you are even employed there. If they have a board of directors that all look the same color and they look like they're the same photo, maybe don't get employed there, like go somewhere else. But if maybe you find yourself and like you work at a place and it's amazing and it's great and they give you great benefits, and a couple of years down the line, maybe they employ somebody that's not great. Well, keep a record, right? HR is not there to protect you. HR is there to protect the company. So the more the documentation that you have, you are doing what in the Navy would be like a CYOA, cover your own ass, right? If you have a documentation of, I went to this meeting on this date at this time with these people, we discussed this, meeting is over. All right, I'm sending an email, CCing everybody who was there. These are the things that I discussed.
Yeah,
HR is not going to be able to touch you without a lawyer present. And
I made a really big
position
mistake
you want to be in.
Not doing that early career. Document everything. Everything.
I kind of want to compound this because this is also, like Heather had mentioned, it's a very loaded question, because while you can do your OSINT about the company beforehand, there is also a lot of anti-OSINT they can do. The larger the company, the more difficult this gets. One of your most surefire methods of identifying whether it's going to be a good or a bad fit is during your interview. It is not a one-way road where they are asking you questions and you have to respond. You also are interviewing them to see if they will treat you well. This is not just related to the hiring manager, but directly related to the people interviewing you as your peers. That is the most surefire method of identifying whether or not you are going to be treated well at any organization, at least in your immediate onboarding.
I would encourage you to ask that question too. Like if they can't answer a good diversity question, like I had an interview maybe a couple months ago where I asked them like, what's the diversity like at your company? And they blamed it on the applicants. Mm-hmm. And I basically told them like, that's not an acceptable answer. This interview is over. And that's it, we're done. And I encourage you to do that. I mean, obviously if you need work, get work. But if you're in a position where you can push back, do it.
I was just going to put on, add to what Willow was saying, is that at the end of the day, you got to pay bills, right? Yep. We're all in a position of having, I guess, like this entitled, thing where it's just like we can say, hey, obviously D&I is not valued at your company. I'm going to go look somewhere else. If you need money, you need to pay bills.
Yep.
You need to handle you, right?
Yeah. And don't feel bad for, if you know that a role is going to be shitty, but you just need something to get by, do not feel bad for accepting it and continuing to look. That is something that I see all too often, where people think it is some sort of marital agreement, and in a way it is, but not to that extent. Like, it is perfectly okay for it to be a temporary situation and you pivot elsewhere if it is not a good fit. Do not have second regrets on that one.
Yeah, just take the steps to protect yourself.
Yep.
Exactly.
And make sure you know how much you're going to owe if you do quit when you've gotten some sort of signing bonus or other stuff.
Yes.
Also take into account, I mean, I guess it depends on how big the red flags are, but I think kind of mental health is one of those invaluable things. So you don't want to jeopardize your mental health for a paycheck ever, but I think, yeah, it just depends on how bad a company looks. I guess one of the other points I wanted to say in regards to this question is like, this is technically something that statistically, as far as like if the statistics haven't changed for the club demographics, won't affect a lot of the people in the audience directly, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect you at all. And I think the people that aren't affected, or that are kind of in the majority in terms of gender or race, still need to be kind of cognizant on the things that go on and be able to help out. Like, if somebody else is going through an issue where they're being discriminated against or kind of treated differently because of their race or gender, it's kind of our role to also kind of step in and help, right? If you're just an innocent like if you're a bystander doing nothing, you're not necessarily innocent, type of thing.
Yeah, where I work, it's pretty diverse, so it's not as big of an issue. I mean, granted, it's software development, so software development as a field tends to be more heavily male dominated. If you're in classes and you see that there's lots of males in your classes, it really doesn't change as much when you get to the industry, and that's unfortunate. But another thing is that culture can change gradually, but it does require sort of somewhat active and somewhat passive changes. So like, if people are making off-color jokes, you don't have to laugh. And I think that's important, because when you sort of have this passive thing where gradually those off-color jokes go down, it's a better environment for everyone. And I don't really know what else I can add to this, because obviously you can see what I look like, sort of thing. So, but yeah, it's tough in the industry.
The only thing is, I would add to what everybody else has said, is if you're having disagreements with your coworkers and they're doing things illegal, don't wait.
Yes, do not.
Yeah.
Yes.
That super quick. Don't even necessarily intervene in most cases. Document, honestly. Let someone else do the hard part. Ironically, that is also a mixture of your problem and HR's at the same time. So document. Also, if things are going well, document. If things are going badly, document. If you don't know how things are going, document. It could be an email to yourself, document. Emails are often retained longer than the lawyers think they are, document.
Oh yeah.
Emails are also easily able to be admissed into court, document. Document.
And I guess before we get off this question, since it's tangentially related, there are groups of folks that chat about different employers. I know, women and non-binary have several spaces that are super awesome. But, talk pay is huge. You can talk about your salary. Everybody can compare and figure out, am I being paid commensurate with what I should be? And for me as a manager, I get to know what people should make, which is awesome, because then I can make sure that my people are paid appropriately. But also, like, it's an underground kind of whisper net, and it helps for learning the environments getting other people's experiences with companies. And that's not just limited to, women, non-binary, people of color. Like, everybody here is going to have a different experience at whatever company, and you can share that. And I encourage you to kind of use that network to figure out, is this a good spot for me or not? When I took the job at Veracode, it was Melissa Elliott on Twitter. I was like, hey, you're at this place. Is this a good place for me to go? Because, I'm me and I'm very special and I have certain needs for a company that I'm going to go to. And she was like, seems legit. It'll be fine. And I applied. She doesn't know me. She's just a Twitter person who I followed and reluctantly got to DM me. But like, that was helpful. So definitely ask questions when you're unsure. You might learn stuff about, potential employers, people you're going to work for, all sorts of things.
Thank you for your answers. So I'm not sure to who this applies in the panel, but if anyone has their master's degree, was it worth it?
Kinda. I guess you have to wrap that and like define worth it. So I got my master's at Penn State through Lockheed Martin, and that was part of a co-op, and that was totally worth it, even though it was totally suffering, because I haven't needed a certification ever since. People look at it and go, oh, master's, okay, clears the HR jump, let's have a chat. But as far as like educational value, I don't know. That's a tough one.
I'm trying to like pull this up so I can like verify that I'm not crazy. Basically, okay, so LinkedIn has a pro version, right? You pay for it or you're a veteran and you can see insights on other candidates when you apply to a job. I'm currently looking at a senior cloud security engineer promoted by Genesis. It's in Denver, it's remote. There are 5 senior level applicants. 40% have a master's degree, 40% have a bachelor's degree, 20% have a master's of a BA in business administration. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that you are competing in a market during a recession with a bunch of other people who also have bachelor's degrees. I hope you have found a way somehow to set yourself above and beyond who is applying right now. Because if you think that you're just applying with other college graduates, you are wrong. You are applying with everybody else that lost their jobs. So do I think that it is worth it? The answer is yes. Because as more people go through boot camps or finish bachelor's degrees, and they'll have that really pretty BS in cybersecurity, it doesn't mean they know anything. Unfortunately, it is another piece of paper that says that you're qualified.
I'm going to expand on this one because it's also tangential to the last question too. Those networks that people talk on are super important because these things grow naturally. And networking is a hell of a beast in our industry because what ends up happening is, especially if you do a good job and you are good at what you do and you are a generally personable person and you do good things out of the kindness of your heart, people notice. And the moment you say that you are on the job market, people want you. And that matters a lot when trying to get a foothold into a potential job opening. And education can help you with this. It is a very weird misconception, in my opinion. A lot of people are like, education, it's whatever. You can learn everything online and whatnot. That's cool and all, but that really, really, really depends on the institution in which you attend. CMU, for example, has some stellar alumni because they have some stellar courses and material, and you can learn a lot. And that carries a lot of weight. So not just the fact that you have a master's, but where you got it from and what you did with it and who you know. All of these things matter. And at the same time, I say this because you could have a master's, you could have a PhD, you could be the best and top person in your field, and you could apply for an entry-level role and not get it because people know that you are a terrible human being.
Yes.
So keep this in mind because people do talk and more people listen.
That's happened more than once during hiring.
I think everybody's pretty much covered it. I would say I think it just depends on what you're going for. If you're going for that network, I think it is really good to go to an in-person kind of graduate degree if you didn't get to build as big of a network as you would have liked in a undergrad. And take into account things like competition teams and research, I guess, for grad school. If you're going for technical content, I always said I would never go for a master's, but tuition reimbursement's a thing. So I'm enrolled in like SANS University, which isn't a real master's. It's just kind of SANS certs, and your company pays for it. So that's always an option too. I wouldn't recommend paying for it out of pocket, but if you've got somebody paying for it, whether it's Uncle Sam or a company, I think SANS University is the way to go because those SANS certs hold way more weight than a master's degree does in this industry.
Yeah, don't pay for your master's. Get somebody else to pay for it.
Yes, I think that's the core there.
Yep. And not to extend this further, but also when you get an offer, see if you can negotiate tuition repayment stuff. Seriously, a lot of them will not offer it unless you ask. Just ask.
And then the last note, be sure to get at least one internship. Because if you have a master's, it's still going to be just as hard to get hired if you don't have any experience as a bachelor's, or pretty near as hard. So try to get at least one internship before leaving college, because the very first thing when you hand your resume to a hiring manager, look and see where they stop. On mine, they didn't stop till the bottom, and that was a bad sign because I didn't have any experience at the time. So yeah, just get that first internship in college if you can.
I think this next question also can kind of be wrapped into the previous one, but if there's anything additional to add for this specifically, how do you stay competitive in the industry?
I guess it's
By
kind of
not
like,
hating your job, or also alternatively by hating your job.
What are you, Cryptia?
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of just like staying up with new technologies and always kind of learning. If you're ever in a place where you're not really learning anything else, you might want to reconsider what you're doing. So I think that like school is one thing, Hack UCF is one thing, but it's like it's all like a continuous learning process as like new trends will happen, new technologies will come out, and to remain competitive, you also should be learning like these new things as they're more related to the specific like field that you're in, like specific like subset of security, right? I think that's just a big thing is always like trying to make time, whether it be in your job or whatever, to like learn and read about these like new things, right? And
Yeah,
just
I
like try
mean,
it out.
playing with stuff is cool. It doesn't have to be productive. Just play with new things and learn them and do silly stuff. Even if that's blinking an LED on your desk or it's, writing some web app to count the cats in your neighborhood. It's just learning stuff because you want to learn the stuff. Obviously, if you can learn stuff that's valuable to your job, that's awesome too. But make it enjoyable because otherwise you're going to hate your life.
Yeah. In a less naive way than I've put before, I think it's also important to note if you are trying to balance multiple things, don't feel bad for not doing side projects and similar. Like there are many candidates that I had interviewed that were, doing school and working. They don't have time for side projects. Their work stuff was NDA'd and they can't talk about the things that they did. They can show you that they can do the things, like, and all of those things. So it's one of these interesting things where there is a fine balance between your growth and your sanity. Don't try to go too much on one and neglect the other. And also, don't hold others to that same scale. This is something that we see consistently in hiring, and some of the major tech companies are 100% responsible and do this, but side projects are a discriminatory practice in many cases. Like, for example, if there is a single mom and she has 3 kids and a full-time job, and you ask her about a side project, she's going to be like, yeah, I have 3 of them. Like, that's totally expected, but you don't want to like discriminate on this. And it is 100% okay to just ask them if they can walk you through some of the cool types of things that they've done to show that type of knowledge. Like, you don't have to have a complete side project. You don't have to go all in on side projects. I have an entire folder of like 300 side projects that I have just literally yeeted into a hard drive for potentially looking at it later. And like, not one of them is finished, and that's okay. I think that was one of the biggest things that I've seen people hold themselves to and absolutely get frustrated because they could never finish a project. So do it to learn. You don't have to complete it. Pace yourself and like actually keep in mind the fact that like you matter as well. So
since we're kind of skirting on the burnout talk, and everybody in here is in a computer science related field, i.e. tech, or going into tech, you usually have to talk about you are not your job, you are not your productivity, you are not the thing, you're not your projects, you are you. And generally, and it took me probably 20 years to figure this out, it takes a lot longer to recover from burnout than it does just to fix your habits in the first place.
Absolutely.
And it could mean like you leaving the career path entirely if you burn out too hard.
Right. We are coming up very close on time, but we still have a few minutes left. We can go ahead and do a speed round if y'all are game for just a few fan favorite questions, I guess, that have risen to the top. So one of the questions come up is, what is the biggest thing you have learned in the field, like working with others, that you did not learn in college?
Yes.
Agreed.
It's college teaches you how to learn things. Experience teaches you the things you needed to know.
Critical
Yeah.
infrastructure is scary.
I would say not all of life is college. You're not always going to be amongst kind of a group of tryhards that are always trying to one-up each other. In the real world, as long as you're a dependable person and you're willing to kind of put the time in and be dependable to other people on your team, you're going to be successful. It doesn't matter whether you're getting C's or A's on your tests. It's not all a big competition.
When you come home from work, if you can shut off work, do that. Like, my boss always makes a point of like, when she goes home, she's at home. She's not at work. So I learned that from her, because it's like, once you reach around 2 years or so in the industry, you start to realize that no, work is work and home is home, and keep those two separate as much as you can.
Yeah, for college, just like CS is not software engineering at all. They're completely different things. Computer science is very fundamental, and you're learning like all these different algorithms and stuff like that. But like most of the time, I'm not going to say all the time because you will use some of these maybe, but like most of the time you're dealing with like hash maps and lists.
Arguing about agile.
I think an underpinning of a lot of the things that I end up having to deal with, at least, or have had to deal with for the past several years, is finding the problem and fixing the problem, no matter what the context is, are two totally different conversations. This applies to people as well as the tech. So, yeah.
I suppose we can do one last question that's been here for a bit. So, have politics, quote unquote politics, ever gotten in the way of your careers, or how did you deal with that?
Yes, they have.
Which
We're
politics?
still dealing with it.
Oh man.
I think the question is in regards to office politics. I'm not sure if we want to limit it to that or.
I mean, I can go on about it, but
They've both gotten into my way.
Yeah.
I welcome someone, I welcome the opinion of whoever you can find that can actually say that they have never had to deal with politics in the workplace. I'll leave it open to that.
I think I have the best story though. Probably. We had an internal team that didn't want to share source code with another internal team. That's got to top the list, I think. It went up to like managers of managers of managers of managers level, and it still hasn't been resolved to this day.
The political abyss.
yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest politics thing was when I went to Lockheed, because there's 146,000 people that work there at the time. And I learned really quickly that being able to write the right email can really do a lot for your career. And it sounds really stupid, but writing a business email can get you a job. It can get a problem off your back. It can avoid a bunch of issues that you don't want to deal with. But being able to kind of craft an email in such a way that you ask a question that gets them to give you an answer that you weren't even asking for, that's awesome. Because sometimes you have to ask questions to get people to ask their own questions, and then all of a sudden they have an epiphany that they owe you something from 6 days ago, and you're just trying to not be a terrible human and call them out. But yeah, I'd say that, business email skills are super huge, especially for our careers, because a lot of folks aren't going to take the time and won't know how to do it.
What you're saying, Willa, is that a master's degree in English might actually be a meaningful pursuit.
If it includes a course on like political BS, then yes. Because sometimes you have to play the chain of command, and sometimes you have to know how to say things in a way that is kinder than you want to, but it's super valuable to be able to do that.
Yeah, I would say whether it's local politics, where the C-suite just came back from RSA and they want to pivot to a whole new tech stack, and you need to convince them that that's probably not a good idea, but you can't use the word you and you can't use the word just because you don't want to offend them because it's only in text.
Yeah.
What people don't seem to remember is that, like right here, we have this video call. You can see me. I've got some hand gestures, and you can kind of see like my facial expressions, and you got indications from like body motion, whether I'm positive or not. Well, you lose all of that in text. So if you only have a sentence, it could be, well, she's too blunt.
Yep.
You have to, it's funny because I actually had to work with Ian Meyer about how I communicated virtually, right, over text. You have to sandwich the things that you say into a way that they will do the things you want them to do without, giving you a bunch of crap about it. So if we've already had the social engineering talk, like social engineering, big deal in the business workplace, and nobody even really talks about it.
Yeah, sandwiching is really important. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's you basically start with a compliment and then tell not really what you really think, but sort of like your honest critique. And then you end with a compliment as well. And it really forces you to think about the other person that's involved too.
I have been warned by management training that that is a bad thing for constructive feedback, because it's, and I hate to use this word because you are recording, but it's a shit sandwich, and nobody wants to eat it. So when you're giving feedback to folks, try to be direct, but also understand like where you stand. I'll give a story. I'll give the 5-hour energy story. It's fine. Once upon a time at Lockheed Martin, I was a level 1, just a software dev, and I got this email from some VP wanting to have a meeting on a Monday at 7 a.m. And I was like, it's Friday. No, I'll deal with that later. And no one showed up to this meeting. Not a single person showed up to this meeting. And, I had every boss I've ever had at Lockheed Martin call me to their office and say, why did you miss this meeting? I told them, it's 7 a.m. I'm a level 1. What did you think was going to happen? That was not the correct thing to say. That's what we can casually call a career-limiting move. So depending on who you say that stuff to, you might not have a career long. So I would encourage you to choose your words very, very wisely. Thankfully, I had good management who understood, and that VP was also known to be a horrible person, so no one liked her. But yeah, that's, it can go a long way how you say something, not what you say.
How you say is important.
Conversely, also understanding the intent of other people's criticism and feedback is also very important, because that is something that might not be as easy to learn. Identifying when it is actually constructive feedback or it is like a personal attack or similar, and figuring out how to navigate those types of conversations, because sometimes it's as easy as going, I don't know if you intended this to be offensive, but I don't like this. Other times you have to shit sandwich it. Other times you have to reach out to your manager and go, hey, is this person okay? Like, sometimes that happens, and there's no rule manual for this. You just got to kind of learn how to test the waters.
Arguably
Personal
be
dynamics.
flexible. Be flexible over the years, because remember, like, for a couple of us who've been out in the work world for a little while, when you start working around people, especially elderly men who've been around since like the 80s or 90s, in office chatter tends to be a little bit different than, say, you're working around your peers who are all in their 20s.
Yes.
Way different.
Way different.
For example, I got called out for saying yeet because I forgot that yeet is like a newish word for certain age groups, and yeeting things into the cloud confused everyone on the call.
Please put that in a report. I would love to read that.
It's good.
Right.
Fire replaced lit. When did that happen? No. Yeah, we had a new intern that used the word fire. Like, everything is fire, and I'm like, oh no, I'm already getting old.
That's okay. I had to teach an employee what honey badger was. He had never seen the video.
Well, I haven't either, so sorry.
Yeah, that's just, yeah.
I have coworkers that have never seen hackers, and they're security engineers.
That's fine. It's not realistic. Just as long as they've seen sneakers, we're okay.
Right. As we prepare to close, there is after speaking for about an hour now, we've all been on this call. I think it's only fitting now to get to this question that has been stored up. So how do you, just in closing real quick, as we run just a bit over time, have you ever been burnt out, and how do you avoid it? How do you deal with it? How do you do that?
Yes.
Okay, Heather, you are allowed to put me on full blast because you are probably the most knowledgeable person that can give non-me opinions on my own burnout.
Well, first of all, let me say that Bobby is a machine, and most of us cannot facilitate our lives day to day the way that he can. Whether it's down to like personal decisions, like I like to eat meat and drink alcohol and have way too much caffeine. Generally, when you get to higher levels of work and productivity output, you have to start optimizing yourself in a way that's not very fun. My therapist, and yes, I have a therapist and have had several of them, would say that you go from being a human being to a human doing, right? And you're not a human doing, you are a human being. So eventually you have to kind of sit around and contemplate the world and have your own existential crises or whatever on your own time. But if you're working and all you're doing is being productive, you don't actually have time to do that. And eventually your body will do that for you.
I mean, I got burnt out a really long time ago when I was a developer in what I thought was a dead-end job, and I went to DEF CON. And I lucked out that when I got back, someone gave me a job because I did not want to be doing what I was doing. But definitely you have to kind of feel it out. Sometimes it's too late when you're already burnt out to recover. Don't let it get there, trust me. But you know, and don't feel bad for taking care of yourself either. Like a couple folks mentioned therapists, like I have one. I see her every couple weeks. I need that. I need someone that I can tell my garbage to who isn't going to judge me and isn't someone I care about. And that's super important, especially when you start doing the crazy political stuff or, you know, gender stuff at work or, you know, just about everything. Therapy's a good thing, or a nice squishy plush toy. Those are good too. But yeah, DEF CON saved lives. Thanks, John.
John knows where it's at. So like we were talking earlier about how you go to a workplace and it's not like, it can be great coming in and it doesn't always stay that way, you know, depending on who they hire. And I had a C-suite CTO who I worked directly under who was later prosecuted for trying to steal money and steal our clients. And obviously they were a really great person, right? He would retaliate against employees. Like he was kind of one of those people who would be like, oh, I've got all this great stuff. And he would sell that. And then when the engineers couldn't deliver, all of the engineers got thrown under the bus and would get retaliated against. Sometimes you don't want to go to your HR person or your office manager or your project manager or your coworkers and be like, am I crazy? Is this like, are they retaliating? You want to go to somebody who's impartial, who's on your side. And sometimes having that prior to that incident occurring is really beneficial. But like back to burnout, a lot of the symptoms of burnout mimic the symptoms of depression. So sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm like really down today, and you have like a whole bunch of days. Sometimes it's not depression, sometimes it's burnout.
I think it's also important to note, like a lot of people hint on like burnout either in a technical sense or just in like an emotional sense. Like I think it's important to note you can be burned out of the people you are around, not necessarily the technology you are working on. You can also be burnt out of the technology you are working on and not the people around you, which can make many of these dynamics absolutely heart-wrenching to fix, because in certain cases you are leaving a bad thing for a good reason, and also leaving a good thing because of a bad reason. So it's like, it's this weird dynamic of like, you could love the people you're working with, but you hate what you're working on. Or you can hate the people you're working with, but love what you're working on. And you're going to give something up in either one of those cases. And so one of the hardest,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And sometimes it's not even the people or the technology, it's the politics and the way the org runs.
Yeah. And
not being able to fix anything or affect change.
Yeah. And I think noticing it, be receptive of folks that you communicate with on the daily, because sometimes it is easier for them to see it in you than it is for you to see it in yourself. Which means like, if you don't have someone that you communicate frequently with about these types of things or feel comfortable talking about these types of things with, like reach out to a therapist. Honestly, they're there to help you and be that unbiased outside opinion, and help you walk through these problems. Not there to fix it for you, but they're there to help you through it. And there's nothing wrong with it. With that in mind, do your best to try to break down why you feel that way and how you might remediate it as early as possible, because the longer you wait, the harder it gets. And do realize that it can and potentially will happen multiple times. I can count 2 to 3 distinct times that I have felt this within the past 6 years. So, yeah.
What is it about 6 years? Like every 6 years I get burnt out.
Life stages. They change.
Yeah, I can definitely count twice. The first time was the military, because they had us on port and starboard shift work, where it's like you come in, you stand duty through the night, you join morning stand up in the morning, you work that whole day, and then you go home for that night, and you do that back and forth. So like I was married to a man who that obviously didn't work out, right? Because I was working so much. The second time was trying to balance everything. I was balancing school and work and volunteering and conferences and eventually you don't have anything else to give left, right? You need to take care of the meat sack because the meat sack will take care of you. Unfortunately.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off that, I'll try to be quick here, but you don't really owe anybody anything other than yourself, in the sense that you don't want to ignore the signs of initial burnout because you feel like you owe somebody something, even if it's something as big as you're the head of some big volunteer organization, right? And you feel like you owe it to yourself to keep this organization running, right? But in the end, like, somebody else will take care of it. And I mean, you owe it to try to help out as much as you can, but your health always comes first. And you do owe things to yourself. Like, one of those is kind of taking care of your body. I mean, like, trying to stay fit, feeding yourself well. What you put in is what you get. So I know a lot of us kind of tend to go for the Soylent or other unhealthy food route, but it's good to eat well and try to work out, try to take care of your physical body. So.
I think one more thing too, which people just haven't really touched too much on, is like take advantage of the vacation days you have. Especially like if your company has like flex vacation, they oftentimes will do it so that you feel like you don't need to do it because you don't have this that like builds up and then you run out of it stacking over. But like take advantage of it. Go like have fun. Go do other stuff that isn't related to work. And even if you can't travel anywhere, it's like take a couple of days off and just like decompress. Right? It's like just don't think about work. Don't go on Slack. Don't
Take
go on,
more
like,
vacation right now because
Yeah.
you need it.
Also, on the unlimited vacation note, if they truly are okay with unlimited vacation, you can also get them to put in your signing like offer letter a minimum vacation policy so that you do not feel bad and you must take those days. Because some people don't feel comfortable with going over a certain number, but if you have to at least take that amount, then it is contractually binding.
That sounds awesome.
HR will let you know if you're taking too much. Also,
Yep.
It's like HR and your manager, like, don't feel bad asking. It's like,
Yeah. I got in trouble exactly once for letting an employee take too much vacation. And it was right after they changed the utilization targets where I was working at the time to lower them. And I said, well, you lowered the targets.
Okay.
I would just add, weekends are important, and try to avoid spending. This is kind of hypocritical coming from me. Try to avoid spending weekends on the computer, and if you can avoid spending weekends on work, definitely do not spend weekends on work, because that sort of burnout window happens. I've noticed that people who work like 7 days a week tend to get burned out in about like 2 years. People who work 6 days a week tend to get burned out in around like 5 to 8 years. And then people who work like 5 days a week tend to like go till they're like 42 years in and retire. So yeah, those weekends are very important for your decompressing. And it's actually more important to take a break from work because your brain is going to be so much more useful to you on Monday, and you'll be so much happier to go in. Yeah, you'll even be happy to go in on Monday. So yeah.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder. I hate that phrase, but it's true. Lockheed taught me that because we were only allowed to work 40 because we were overhead.
Okay. We're coming up on around that time. Thank you everyone for submitting the questions live today. They were great questions. I hope everyone enjoyed our panelists. Also, thank you to our panelists for taking the time out of their day and off their normal work schedule to come talk to us and answer our questions. You get a virtual round of applause. Thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out. Thank you everyone for coming to our meeting today. If you are still awake at this hour after this wonderful call we've had, you can join us in the Discord. We will be hanging out there afterwards. We also have that Minecraft server, if you do recall that in the announcements. It is a bit after, so without delay, we'll just go ahead and call this meeting here. Thank you everyone for coming. Hope you had a great time, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.